I've recovered from a seemingly hopeless condition of mind and body, but I am not cured of alcoholism. What I really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. I know people who brag, they just can't wait to tell you they're recovered alcoholics, as if they're trying to make a statement. I'm not trying to make a statement. I have alcoholism. If I stop doing AA, I start to recess into me, and I will drink again. And if you don't know that you'll drink again, you need to spend more time every week in detoxes and watch the people that were recovered alcoholics who drank again. So I have a daily reprieve. I don't get into the arguments of my recovered or not recovered, or the people that want to argue the difference between character defects and shortcomings. I mean, what a waste of a meeting. I mean, just come on. It's all ego. It's all ego. Today's the day I must bring a vision of God's will into all my activities. How can I serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. All right, so a couple confusing things. Step 10. In the 12 steps and 12 traditions, it tells us when we do step 10. It says it's a spiritual axiom that when I'm disturbed at all, no matter what the reason, there's something wrong with me. The disturbance is the indication that I have 5 things to do, and the 5 things are talked about on page 84. It is the essence of step 10. And I do them in the moment. This is not the nightly review. There's a lot of confusion. People, we'll get into that later, but people think that the nightly review is step 10. Step 10 is in the moment. And it says the 5 things we do when you're disturbed: stop, pause when agitated. Stop and do these 5 things. We watch. What do we watch for? For the manifestation, the resurgence, the symptoms of the bondage of self. We watch for selfishness. We watch for dishonesty. We watch for resentment, and we watch for fear. First thing you do is watch. The second thing we do, when these crop up, we ask. We ask God at once to remove them. So I'm watching for the manifestations of self. I'm asking God at once to remove them. Third thing, discuss them with someone immediately. Recovery is not done in the dark in your head. Most of it is in the triangle. You know, the 3 sides of the triangle is God, you, and me. And a triangle is like a 3-legged stool. It has stability. Me and God, not so much. Me and you without God, not so much. But you and I and God, the ego likes, I have the kind of ego, I'd like it just to be me and God. You know, because I don't want, people are stupid. Just me and God. And it's me, you, and God. I discuss them with someone immediately. And if it's really humiliating and pathetic and childish and embarrassing, immediately can be 3 months later. I discuss them with someone immediately. The 4th thing, make amends quickly. You know, it took me many years here to realize the importance of promptly in step 10, or quickly in the verbiage here on page 84. I'm one of those kind of guys, especially in embarrassing amends that scare me or cause anxiety in me, or that were going to cost me money. My tendency is to put off as long as I can making the amends. Here's the stupidity in that. I suffer in the interim. I'm the guy that's held hostage by my egocentric inability or unwillingness to go and do the right thing. Put it off. It holds me. It holds me. And I, believe me, I've gone like months, and finally, when it would eat me. It's like a stone in your shoe. Finally, you can't take it anymore. And you go and make amends, and it's like, oh my God, all of a sudden you're free, you feel good again. Why did I wait so long? Why did I I suffered for pride. I suffered for ego. Why was I willing to do that? It took me many years here to really, at a gut level, realize the truth that there is nothing more important than my spiritual condition. And I'll tell you, there was probably at least 20 years or more of my sobriety where that was not the case. I would be willing to suffer for money, for sex, to be right, to resist doing what I need to do. I would suffer for that stuff. As if the trappings for gratification in the ego were more important than my spiritual condition. And the horrible thing about that is that there's nothing more important than my spiritual condition. Because no matter how good you willfully get it out here, if it ain't no good in here, I'm telling you, it ain't no good. That's why guys in $5 million houses blow their brains out with 10 years of sobriety. They got everything they want out here, but they got nothing in here. And there is nothing more important than my spiritual condition. Does that mean I do this perfectly? Absolutely not. Does that mean that my spiritual condition is always right? Absolutely not. There's some days, there are days when my spiritual condition is so good, I should have a tent and a tambourine. And then there are other days where I don't feel like a very good example of AA. Or I'm worried about stuff I can't let go of, or I got resentments, or all that stuff. But the main piece of business in my life is my spiritual condition. There's nothing more important. Do you know, I know what it's like to have no money and no material things at all, just be struggling at a minimum wage job from paycheck to paycheck, and no extreme happiness and tremendous usefulness, because I got an old beat up car that the power windows don't work. And there's no air conditioning, and I'm driving around the heat in Las Vegas, but I got the car full of new people, and I'm excited about being alive. And I also know what it's like to drive a 12-cylinder bi-turbo AMG Mercedes that belonged to Charlie Sheen, and drive around in this $200 and some thousand car and feel miserable, right? It has nothing to do with out here. It has to do with in here. So it's a long lesson to learn for some of us. Tough lesson for some of us. And then the fifth thing is our new default position. So I watch, I ask, I discuss, I make amends, and then finally I return to my primary number one purpose of turning my attention to someone I can help. And that is the essence of the actions of step 10. There's some promises in step 10, and there's also some warnings in step 10. The promises, I think, are beautiful because they're more than just drinking, even though this is the first place in the process of the 12 steps where it gives us hope and a promise that we will be free from the hook of alcohol. The promises start on the bottom of page 84 when it says, we've ceased fighting anything and anyone, even alcohol. So if you've got conflict inside yourself and you're arguing in your head with people and situations, you haven't got this. We've ceased fighting everything and anyone. For by this time sanity will have returned. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame. We react sanely, and normally we'll find that this has happened automatically. If alcohol had done to you physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and your family and loved ones what it did to me, recoiling from it as from a hot flame would be a sane reaction. moving towards it like a moth to a flame would be an insane reaction. So by this time, sanity maybe really has returned. It says we'll see our new attitude towards liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. That's true, and yet we've done a lot of work up to this point. We've done the first 9 steps. We've made amends. We've written an inventory. We've tried to develop a relationship with God. We've been trying to surrender everything about us to God. It's not that we haven't done some work, but the effort and the thought has not been against the bottle. You know, when I was new, I heard a speaker, and I'd been relapsing for over a half dozen years. And I heard a speaker say it was the funniest thing I'd ever heard of, because it was true. He said, I quit drinking over 50 times, seriously. He said, every time I quit drinking, I got drunker than hell. He said, you know, that quitting drinking was killing me. And I thought, oh my God, I couldn't tell you how many times I swore to myself, and sometimes tearfully, and meant it, that I'll never touch that stuff again, and be just horrified that before the year's out, I'm back at it again. And I come into Alcoholics Anonymous in 1978, and you guys, by getting a sponsor and following his directions, what he did is he got me out of the ring where I was fighting the bottle, and he got me into the right arena where I was fighting the alcoholism, the selfishness, the dishonesty, the unmade amends, the self-involvement to the point of almost obsessiveness. He got me out of fighting the bottle, because that is a battle I can't win. And he got me into a place where there was hope, where I can deal with Alcoholics Anonymous can give me the tools to battle this obsessive self-involvement that makes my spirit so sick that I get so crazy that drinking starts looking like a good idea. And I've been sober continually without any medication or anything from the moment I got out of fighting the bottle and into fighting the alcoholism. We don't treat alcohol here, we treat alcoholism. We feel as though we've been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. You know, for a long, long time in sobriety, I felt like my head was my enemy. I felt like sometimes my head would drive me crazy. It would create such worry inside of me and such angst. There were times I felt like I was having a nervous breakdown. And I came to this belief that my head was my enemy. But my head's not my enemy. My head is one of the greatest gifts God's given me. It's a great tool. It's just a terrible master, because the ego works through it, right, to chatter at me and scare me. And this concept of being placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected, is come true for me, and it's for the most part. But it's contingent on the maintenance of my spiritual condition. So what does that look like? You know the little voice in your head that worries you, that just tells you, just, you know, how you talk to yourself, and, oh, this isn't going to be good, and this is boring, and I don't like that. That little voice, right? If you're placed in a position of neutrality, it's like putting your car in neutral. You can rev the engine all you want. You're not going anywhere. You're not engaging. That this will chatter almost like music in a doctor's office or a radio station that's on in the car that you're not even listening to. It's background noise in neutral, in a position of neutrality. It's there. The monkey mind never dies, but I don't engage with it. It doesn't drive me. But if it can scare me, if it can all of a sudden on this radio station in the doctor's office I'm not listening to, if it can get me to think that there's a national alert, whoa, it's like all of a sudden it's engaged with me. You don't realize what he's thinking about you. Oh, that headache's really a brain tumor. I never did like you. Then I'm no longer at neutral. Then I've engaged the gears. Book says it's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. It really is. Chamberlain said this, and I didn't understand it at first. Now I think about it a lot because it was absolutely right. Chamberlain said there's only one thing worse for an alcoholic than bad fortune, and that's good fortune. I think sometimes we are killed by our own success. We are seduced into a false sense of control and comfort by the very fruits of our own recovery. And it's easy to let up because what happens, this happens to so many of us. I've watched it hundreds of times, and some of these people can't get back, and some of them are dead. And what happens? They come into Alcoholics Anonymous, they've been beaten half to death by the bag and the bottle. They're demoralized. They don't know what else to do, so they throw themselves into Alcoholics Anonymous. They make AA the center of their life. They start cleaning up the wreckage of their past. And what happens is that they start to feel good. They start to get some respect back, some self-respect, and respect from their family. And now their family welcomes them again. Maybe their employment life starts to take off. And maybe now they're making a couple $100,000 a year, and they're doing well. And they got the big house, and they got the wife, they got the kids. They feel good. They're building a house of cards based on self. And when you're doing that, it's exciting. It's gratifying. It's wonderful. But there might not be anything underneath it. And so what happens? The same person, when the week they got out of detox, oh my God, if you watched them, they looked like they really had a bad case of alcoholism. They were going to 2 meetings a day. They were obsessed, calling their sponsor all the time. They had a bad case of alcoholism. Now at a year sober, now they got a good job, and their girlfriend, who they're eventually going to marry, now they're going to 4 or 5 meetings a week because they're getting busy. Got a full life. 5 years sober, they get making $100,000 or more a year. They're married, got a kid on the way. Now they're going to 2 or 3 meetings a week. They're not doing commitments anymore because they're too busy. Let the newer people do it. At 10 years sober, they have everything they ever wanted externally. And they still have a sponsor because the ego is very clever. The ego will insist that you have the bragging rights of a good AA member without actually being one. So you have a sponsor in name, and you call him up once in a while to tell him what you're doing in your life, because he probably needs to know that. Maybe you could help him. Maybe play golf with him once a month. And you tell yourself you're sponsorable, but you're not. You run your own ship. You may ask people about what their opinion is about stuff, but you make the decisions for you. You can't listen to anybody except you. You're a closed system, and you don't know and there's no surrender anymore, and you don't know it. But you feel good. Isn't it odd when you're 10 years sober and you have a lot of money in the bank and you have everything you wanted, you intellectually still think I'm alcoholic, but your feet will make a liar out of you. You're living the life and taking the actions of someone who doesn't think they have as much alcoholism as they did in their first year. Right? Alcoholism is unforgiving and it's patient. And there's rarely a week that goes by, especially when I was going to West Care. There was hardly a week ever went by that I wouldn't run into somebody in our detox that drank after over 10 years. And it was always the same thing. They didn't even know it. They didn't know what happened to them because they were seduced by the very fruits of their own recovery. And slowly and incrementally, the primary and central purpose of their life stopped being Alcoholics Anonymous and helping others. And they became their primary purpose. And the road to that is benchmarked by ego speak. Things like, you'll hear people say, well, I didn't get sober just to go to AA. What they're really saying is, I got sober for me. And the selfishness is returning, and they don't see it. Or this is a great line. I hear guys say this right before they're about to destroy themselves. They'll say, well, I'm going to put balance in my life. Well, for God, you wouldn't know balance if it ran you over in the street, for God's sakes. What they're really saying is, all right, I'm ready to manage my own life. That's what they're really saying. Let me at the wheel of my ship. How far am I from the surrender, from the decision I made in step 3? How many opinions do I have? You can measure my distance from my own surrender by how many opinions and judgments I have. How full of me am I? How concerned and worried and obsessed with my life am I? It's easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. We're headed for trouble if we do, for alcohol is a subtle foe. We are not cured of alcoholism. What we really have is a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. I am so glad that it says it like that. Because it doesn't say that it's contingent on my spiritual condition. It's contingent on the maintenance. So that means every day I got to do AA. Every day, as Bill says, is the day I have to carry a vision of God's will into all my activities. A kindly act once in a while won't suffice. I have to act a good Samaritan every day. Every day I have a primary purpose, and it's not me. It's to help God's kids. Every day. Tough for selfish people. Tough. We hate it. We hate it. Every day. And so I have to stay in the game. I don't have to have a perfect spiritual condition. Some days my spiritual condition is crap. And some days it's really good. But you know what never changes is I never change the game plan. I get up every morning. I spend 2 hours getting ready for the day. I have my routines that they change from time to time. The best thing I do in the day is honor God by setting aside the time so I don't rush into the day. You know, I know what it's... See, when you're ego-driven, you live with a sense of urgency. Right quick, have some coffee, get out there. Well, I lived like that for a lot of years in sobriety. And the problem, here's what I would experience. I would carry that urgency and that angst into my day. And then wonder why people are annoying me all the time. And wondering why I'm having conflicts and I'm uptight a lot. Well, I set the stage in the morning. I set the stage. Step 11 is the most confusing step to me. Yet it was the one step I liked. I liked from a distance. I liked the idea of meditation because when I was, growing up, I went to transcendental meditation. I used to read J. Krishnamurti and Alan Watts and the way of some of those Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and I went to Divine Light Mission. I did Raja Yoga, trying to move my chakras around, and I did the breathing, and I did all that stuff. It was cool. I mean, it was hip. We didn't do it to connect us to the universe and to connect us with God. We did it so we'd rise above everybody else. It was a spiritually ego-feeding proposition. I remember going to parties back when I was a kid and walking up to someone and just saying to them, "So, do you meditate?" And if they said no, you go, and walk away. In the smug spiritual superiority, right? I'm not meditating. It's all about me. And the reason I loved yoga and meditation classes, you could always buy some really good marijuana in a yoga class. I mean, it was always, it was there. And chances are you get laid in a meditation class. All you do is chant right. So I get sober, and this idea of meditation is appealing to me. Because I'm going to a lot of meetings, and nobody's really talking about meditation the way I kind of understand meditation from my previous experience. So I want to be the guy who rises above the herd. And so I want to get into it. I want to get into meditation. So I turn to the book, and on the bottom of page 85 starts the section on step 11. You can tell because it says in italics, step 11. And then the paragraph prepares you to give you the directions on what to do in step 11. And the last sentence in that first paragraph, it says, we believe we can make some definite and valuable suggestions on step 11, on prayer and meditation. Well, here's the first suggestion. Doesn't make sense to me. When we retire at night, we constructively review our day. Was I resentful, selfish, dishonest, afraid? Do I owe an apology? Have I kept something to myself which should have been discussed with another person once? Was I kind and loving towards all? And I'm reading this and I'm thinking, that's not right. That's not step 11. It's like step 10. Doesn't make any sense to me. And I have just enough ego at this point, and I don't know it, that I do what egocentric people do. Egocentric people do not follow any directions that aren't their idea. So I never followed the directions in the big book on step 11, and I started seeking and making up and finding my own crap to do. And it's not bad. Matter of fact, towards the bottom of page 87, it says, be quick to see where religious people are right, make use of what they offer. In addition to, but I'm doing it in substitution for, because I ain't doing what AA suggests. Which is really weird because I'm starting to do workshops on the steps, and it would be always really good until we got to step 11. And then I just kind of talk, we just do this every morning, and then we go on to step, I just kind of, because I don't really know what to say. I could say a lot of non-AA stuff, but I don't really know what to do, and because I'm not doing this. And then I had a sponsor, who came to me one day, and pretty serious. He said, I need direction. He said, I'm kind of floundering. I need direction, specific direction on what to do in the morning for step 11. Well, I don't know what to tell the guy. I've done the Course in Miracles. I've went back to the church of my childhood. I said the rosary. I went back to Buddha's, SGI Buddhism, chanted Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. I did breathing exercises. I did that. To this day, I did the prayer of St. Francis, both versions, the channel version and the instrument version. Did both of those. I still use the prayer of St. Francis often. I did I am the place where God shines through. Him and I are one, not two. I need not worry, fret, or plan. He wants me where and as I am. And if I could be relaxed and free, he would carry out his plan through me. And that is a meditation I use to this day sometimes. And it's all good. But I never did what it said in the book. And this guy sponsoring wants direction. I don't know what to tell him. I can't give him 20 things. So I said to him what they teach you to say to newcomers when you don't have a clue what to say to them. And if your sponsor ever says this, either one of these two things to you, what he's really saying is, I got nothing here. The first thing he'll tell you is, well, just pray about it. Just pray about it. But then what he's really saying is, I have no idea. Or the other thing is, just do what it says in the book. Well, that's what I said to this guy. I said, just do what it says in the book. And without prejudice, without preconceived notions, without any idea of what it should be, he actually went to the book and started doing exactly what it said here. When he retired at night, he would take the time and constructively review his day. He would ask himself these questions. Today, where had I been resentful? And he'd think about when he was. And where had I been dishonest? Where had I been afraid? Do I owe an apology? Have I kept something? And he started doing, and then he'd get up in the morning after he'd finished his nightly examination, which is part of step 11. Wilson talks about that in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, why this paragraph is part of step 11. He talks about it in step 11 in the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions when he says that self-examination, meditation, and prayer, when taken separately, can bring about much relief and benefit. But we don't really need relief, do we? We've had enough relief. He said, but when they're logically related and interwoven, they will create an unshakable foundation for life. That's what I want. I want a rock upon which I can build my life. Something I can rely on under all conditions. An unshakable foundation for life. And so this guy's doing it, and he's doing the morning thing, and he's saying the prayers and contemplating the things the book suggests we contemplate and think about it. And in no time at all, he's doing a lot better than I am. And I do not like that. And I thought, well, maybe I should do this. And I started doing it. And to my amazement, what I discovered is it's step 11 as it's this self-examination, this meditation or contemplation and prayer, as suggested on page 86 and 87, is designed for realignment. Because Bill knows something. There is no ultimate surrender here. No matter how surrendered you were yesterday or the day before, chances are you've shifted away from that. And what I've discovered is that this self-examination, meditation, and prayer is so much like what a sailor will use to navigate the ocean. If you were to get down to the harbor here and you were to buy the best ocean-going vessel you could get, and you wanted to sail from Dublin to the island of Bermuda, and you went to the nautical library and you charted the perfect course right around, you get right around the curve and you're going to be dead on for Bermuda. No matter how good your boat is, no matter how perfect the course you've charted, every single day the winds and the tides and the currents are going to blow you off course. It's not because you have a bad boat. It's not because you're not a good sailor. It's just the way it is. And to be a responsible sailor every single day, you got to check your course and see how far off you are. You use your GPS, or maybe you're old school and you get out your compass and your sextant, and you see exactly where you're at. You can't fool yourself about values because you'll be lost at sea. And you see how far off course you are so you can readjust your course back to the island of Bermuda. But in my case, it's not Bermuda I'm heading towards. It's carrying out the decision I made in step 3. This decision to make my life none of my business and devote my life in a self-forgetting manner to helping others is the destination. That's my Bermuda. And every day I find out that I'm off course. Of course I am. Only with me, it's not the winds and the tides and the currents. It's the clamoring of self. It's the things I worry about. It's how the ego misinterprets life and creates resentments. It's all of that. And all of a sudden I'm full of myself again. And if you don't do this, what happens to some of us is you'll be forced every few years to do a massive house cleaning. Because if you're not diligent about this stuff, it slips through the cracks and it builds up. Next thing you know, you're full of yourself and you're self-righteous and you're serious. And you know what's wrong with everybody. And you're all alone. And you're dying inside. And it's time to go back and go through the steps again. I don't engage in the argument that people say, well, you just do the step 10, 11, and 12, and then never do the other steps again. Well, I don't know, man. Suppose if you were not the guy it talks about in chapter 5 when Bill says, no one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles, you probably would never have to go back and do the first 9 steps again. But I think most of us leak. And I got to go back and do a massive house cleaning, and you could call it an in-depth 10-step if you want, if that makes you feel more right. But regardless, any other name, self-examination and cleaning house is still cleaning house, and it piles up, and a massive cleaning house has to come about. Just the way I am. And if you don't, then your mind, in order to maintain its own internal integrity, will start creating delusions for you. You'll start twisting reality a little bit. You'll think, and you'll try to keep telling yourself you're right. I'm not off course. I'm going to Bermuda. Next thing you know, there's chunks of ice with penguins on it floating out of the boat. You know what the alcoholic mind will say? Well, there's now penguins in Bermuda. It's a new thing. I mean, you have to make what Silkworth says to us. Our alcoholic life seems the only normal one. I have to make nonsense make sense to me, and how the justification mechanisms and the explanation mechanisms and the self-righteous all get stronger and stronger. The further off course I get, the more I have to justify my position. I know when I'm wrong. I know when I'm out of line. It gets busy in here. Of course it does. It's the voice of the enemy. It's the voice of ego. Of course it does. The question that throws me off at night is, was I kind and loving towards all? God, I hate that question. It says all. I don't think it's a fair question. It should say, was I kind and loving to the people who deserved it? Was I kind and loving to the people who were kind and loving to me? What about the mean person? What about the angry person? What about the idiot? I mean, let's face it, there's people that they just don't deserve kind and loving. I don't want to be kind and loving to them, I might be encouraging them. And it says to all. My Chamberlain used to talk about something. It took me a long time to understand what he meant. He used to say, it's not my business to worry about me and do for me. That's God's business. It's my business to help God's kids do what they want to do just because I want to help them for fun and for free. And when he said that, my head would go crazy. I think, help them do what they want to do, or what if what they want to do ain't right? He's talking about love and service without prejudice or opinion. Kind and loving towards all. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm asleep in my own life a lot of the time. You know what happens to me is I don't see you. I see my ego's dream of you. I don't see you. I don't really see you. I see things about you that I can judge to be wrong, or judge to be a problem, or judge to be irritating. My ego allows me to just be awake enough to see the things in you that it can have contention with, because it puffs me up at your expense. I aggrandize myself at your expense. But if I could see what God saw, then I'd see your backstory. Then I'd see what's really going on with you. I would see you the way God sees you. I've been in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not proud of this, but this has happened to me several times. Over the years, when I was new, my first few years, I used to, if you said something I didn't like, I'd jump. I couldn't keep my mouth shut. I hadn't learned that restraint of tongue and pen yet. Well, open your mouth a lot in AA and you'll learn to keep it shut, I'm telling you. Because the amends are difficult. Right? That's how we learn to keep our mouths shut. I think I think there's great spiritual wisdom in keeping your mouth shut. I learned that. I could keep my mouth shut. So I go to meetings with I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to mind my own business here. And somebody in the meeting would share something that was just stupid. You know, and they're sharing it in front of new people. Why would you share that in front of? That's the stupidest thing. Matter of fact, it's not even AA. Somebody should slap this guy. Should not call on people like that. I don't say nothing, keep my mouth shut. The meeting's over, and I give the guy a wide berth. I'm not mean to him, but I'm not kind and loving either. And if I'd have pulled my head out of my butt and actually looked past the irritating things he said, and I could other center myself enough, what I would have discovered is, where would I have to be spiritually to have shared what he shared in a meeting? How afraid would I have to be? How angry would I have to be? How hurt would I have to have been? How lost would I have to be? And I'm getting irritated by what he shared, but what he shared is not where he's at. It's just an outward symptom of where he's at. What it really is a cry for help. But he doesn't know how to ask for help. He's too full of himself. So he just spouts off crazy stuff in the meeting. And I went home and I never said hi to him. I just never even was kind to him. And what he really is a guy who needs somebody to talk to. And I missed an opportunity to really be helpful to one of God's kids. And the reason I know that is I've caught a couple of them like that. There was a guy, he's sober now 25 years, I think. He He was in a meeting and he just went off in the meeting, MFing everybody in the meeting. He was hostile, he was crazy. And I'm sitting and everybody's getting irritated by this guy. There's guys in the meeting who want to fight him because of what he's sharing, how he's yelling at people and stuff. And I just happened to be in a good spot spiritually that day. I'm not always this good, but that day I was in a good place. And I sat there and I could see through the outside stuff. I saw how scared he was, how hurt he was. I saw this guy's in trouble. And after he went on his rant and cussed everybody out, he stormed out of the meeting. And I got up quietly and I followed him out into the parking lot. And I spent 20 minutes with him. And he talks about that to this day, about how I came out there and he was on his way to get drunk. How I came out there and stopped him. I didn't stop him. I was awake, that's all. I just saw him. I really saw him. Now, there are many, many, many times where I've been in the same situation, and I'm too asleep in my life to see what's really going on. Am I awake? And I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves, to grow in understanding and effectiveness. The book says it's not an overnight matter. And it's not an overnight matter. It continues for a lifetime. One of the great things about Alcoholics Anonymous that I think sets us apart as a distinct entity from every religion I've ever seen or church I've ever gone to. I looked at some of the religious things on TV. One of the things we do here that's a little bit different is contained within our 11th step, where we pray only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry it out. Most religions encourage the people that go there to pray for abundance, for health, for all kinds of things. We do not do that here because we know something. We know we don't know. And we know that there's a certain ego-feeding arrogance in praying for your will. I mean, when you think, I remember as a kid in school when they talked about the 10 Commandments, the nuns used to beat me up with the second commandment, because when I was about third grade, second grade, I discovered the F word. I didn't know what it meant, except it had power to make the nun's face turn red. Oh my, it was like abracadabra. I could actually have a physical effect in the world from a word. It was magical, man. I don't know what it means, but it made my mother's face turn red, got me sent to the office. Magical word, powerful word. So I said it a lot. Nuns told me I was going to go to hell. They said I was breaking the second commandment. The second commandment is, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. They said that included all profanity. And they said it included all of that. Well, I try not to cuss. And you know why? I don't think God cares. But maybe one of you would. I wouldn't want to be offensive to you. I wouldn't want to say something someone that's offended that would leave Alcoholics Anonymous. I don't want to be that guy, so I try not to cuss. Not because I don't think God cares. God doesn't care. But maybe somebody in here would, so I don't do it. It's just respect, that's all. I'm just respecting the person, the man or woman who might be in the meeting that might be offended by that, that's all. But I don't think that's a breach of the commandment. When you think about it, taking the name of the Lord thy God in vain, what is the vainest use of God in prayer I could ever, wouldn't it be to pray for my own will? For my own selfish ends? For what I want? I mean, when you think about it objectively, it's insane. Here, God's been running the universe wonderfully, perfectly, for billions of years, But Bob's here now. And I'm going to instruct God? I mean, there is a vanity. That is the vainest use of that I can imagine. Is there anything more vain than me telling the creator of the universe what to do? I mean, it's presumptuous of me, isn't it? That I know best. See, in Alcoholics Anonymous, there's an innate humility and an innate surrender in our principles that we know we don't know. And the test of time bears that out experientially over and over and over again, because those of us and we don't do it perfectly, none of us, but those of us who try to remain surrendered and try to seek and accept God's will, whatever it may be, we discover something in time. That God's vision of Bob's life is better than anything I could have imagined. That I'll take what God will give me because I have gotten what I wanted and I didn't even want it. I'll take what he wants. And that really is the proper use of the will, is to align my will with God's. I've had this condition in me for as far back as I can remember. It's caused me a lot of difficulty. Is that there's something about me that I just want. I want. If you ask me, what do you want? I don't know. More. Yours. I don't know. Different. I want. Half the time I don't know what I want. But I want. I'm always looking for what I want. And then when I get it, that ain't what I want. I want. And I've never been able to find the off switch to my wanter. I don't know how to stop wanting. So what do you do if it's making me miserable and chronically malcontent and often depressed? When you get what you want, you fought for it, and you got what you want, and that ain't it either, and you're tired. And it often made me depressed. What do? If you can't turn it off and you can't stop wanting, there's only one thing to do. Want what someone else wants. Want what God wants. How do you know what God wants? Well, that's the big question, isn't it? What's God's will? Well, I think most of us know what it's not. What does God's will look like? Well, any vision of God's will that only serves me and gratifies me and does for me is probably not a vision of God's will. God's will seems to be the greatest path of love. It's the greatest path of service. There's a passage in the Bible, and I'm not promoting the Bible by any means. I think I find goodness in every spiritual piece of literature ever written. But it's in Corinthians. It's often used at weddings, and it talks about love. You could take the word love out of that passage and put in God's will, and it would make sense uniformly through the whole passage. God's will never feels like you're pounding a square peg into a round hole. That is willful. God's will is never all about you. God's will never is at the expense of someone else. It's the path of the greatest freedom, the path of the greatest love. It's not self-serving. It usually involves helping somebody else. So I don't always know in incidental instances in my life what God's will is, but if I will pause and think about the situation, I kind of know what God's will isn't. And so maybe I just respond and do what's next. And I discovered that my quest, my obsessive interest in finding God's will was one of the most self-serving things I did. Because I want to find God's will, because I want the inside track. It's about me. About me. this praying for only, there's a lot of prayers that, the serenity prayer, really, and I think it's a good prayer. I do, and I say it, but it kind of runs in contradiction to the 11th step. The serenity prayer is not about praying only for God's will. You're giving God direction. You're telling God what to do. You're saying, God, take a knee. Grant me serenity. Write this down. Serenity. Got to make a list. Serenity. Accept the things I cannot change. Courage. Give me. Okay. Next to serenity, give me courage. You got this? Just serenity, courage. Wisdom. Got to give me some wisdom. So, God, you got this? Wisdom, courage, serenity. I'm telling him what to do. I'm not saying that's bad. It's just a little bit of an unsurrendered position. And what happens in a lot of AA groups around the world is that they'll end the serenity prayer by saying, thy will, not mine, be done. And it kind of brings it back a little bit. The one prayer that aligns itself most perfectly to our 11th step is an old ancient Hebrew prayer that most people don't know it's a Hebrew prayer. They think it's a Christian prayer because it was adopted on the Sermon on the Mount by Christ. And it's used in a lot of churches, but you can actually trace it back to hundreds of years before Christ. And there's a great article, it's called The Lord's Prayer. There's a great article in the Grapevine written by a rabbi that says Judaism and the Lord's Prayer, where they trace it back to pre-Christianity. And I have a friend who's very scholarly when it comes to all this stuff. And she told me that there's a version of the Lord's Prayer, a pre-Christian version, and if you read it, it's the second half is very different than the current version of the prayer. And the first half of the prayer in the English sort of lines up with the 11th step, and then it shifts, and it's in contradiction with itself. But the original Hebrew version wasn't in contradiction with itself. It says, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. We're kind of in line. We're honoring God. We're praising him. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And then it shifts, and now you start telling God what to do. Give me this day my daily. You start giving God orders. Forgive me. You're telling him what to do. Well, in the pre-Christian version, it was more like this. It was a recognition. You give us this day our daily bread. And you always have, haven't you? You forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And you've always led us away from temptation. Lead us not into temptation. You lead us not into temptation, and you deliver us from evil. It was an acknowledgement. It wasn't a set of orders. And I like that. Our Father. In the Hebrew, and I'm not Jewish, but I get fascinated by a lot of different things. In the Hebrew, one of the is a very picturesque language. It's all pictures. And one of the views of God was a depiction of a father returning to his house after a hard day at work. And he's coming up the front steps towards the front porch. And up about 6 or 7 steps on the porch is his young son. And as the father approaches the porch, the son throws himself unreservedly into the air for his father to catch. And that translation of God is the one who will never let you fall. I like that. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Sure glad you're here. Thanks. Thy will be done, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And it is, isn't it? Chamberlain said that heaven's just a new pair of glasses. It's always there, but you can't see it. You're asleep to it. As it is in heaven. I like that prayer. But prayer, there's a lot of anti-religionists that are adamantly opposed to that prayer because, some people, a lot of Jewish people, because I know Jewish people that are opposed to that prayer, and then they find out it's a Jewish prayer, and all of a sudden, oh, that's a good prayer. Yeah, that's a good prayer. Right? It's like crazy. Prejudice ignores content. Prejudice ignores reality. I think it's a great prayer. But that's me. I'm not here to sell anybody on it. We say it at my home group. And we say it slowly and try to think about the words. We don't rush it. I've been to groups where they say the word prayer, they say it like they've all taken methamphetamine. Just, like, I can't wait to get out of here. It's like, it's like this urgency. I just say, oh my God. Take some time with God. I talk to God. Take some time with God. He's the central relationship in your life. He deserves it. Take some time with God. I'm going to talk a little bit about step 12 and we're going to quit. I think it's the most important thing we do here. I had a spot, in the book it says that nothing will so much ensure immunity from drinking as intensive work with other alcoholics. They're not kidding. It saved me from me. My first sponsor was a great servant. I met him because he brought 2 meetings a week into the detox. I didn't know. I thought he didn't have a life or something. Why would he be doing this? I found out later he had a big, robust life. He had a mansion up on the hill with tennis courts that looked out over the city of Las Vegas. He had an amazing life, but he believed that his real purpose was to help other drunks. And so he came to the detox. And he'd spend 2 hours there twice a week looking for guys like me. And I got him to be my sponsor. And I'm not even out of detox a week. And he's pushing me to go do 12-step work. He said, I want you to get on the 12-step list. I want you to go on 12-step calls. And I want you to come back and take the meetings into the detox. And I want you to take meetings into the Samaritan House. And I want you to sign up for the state penitentiary. And just every time I turned around, he wants me to help people. And, I've had a lot of therapy. So I said to him, well, okay, but don't you think I should work on me for a while? And he rears back, he says, work on you. You've done quite enough of that. Stop it. And when he said it, I thought, I have done a lot of that. If I could have been fixed, I'd have been fixed by now, I guess. So I just started to do it. And in those actions, and he had me doing something every day. As the book says, our very lives, page 20, our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others, their needs, and how we can work for them. You know why we do this constantly? Because our inclination is to constantly think about ourselves. So I have to constantly be trying to think about others. It's shoveling shit against the tide of self. And so he had me do this stuff. And I discovered the same thing that my current sponsor discovered, my first sponsor discovered, that Bill Wilson discovered. That it freed me from my depressive nature. And I'd been diagnosed as clinically depressed twice by 2 psychiatrists. Wilson was a depressive. Clancy's a depressive. And yet, all of us have one thing in common. We've all found freedom for this obsessive self-involvement that always leads to depression by constant work with others. And I found Wilson in his story talks about it. He said that there were times when he would be so overcome with this that he was afraid he'd going to drink again. And in desperation, he'd go down to Towns Hospital and he'd ask Dr. Silkworth, do you have a guy I can talk to? I'm in trouble. I need to talk to another drunk. And Silkworth would hook him up, set him into a room with some guy that's throwing his guts up, who's getting sober. And Bill said, after a couple hours in there, I would be miraculously uplifted and set on my feet. He said it was he said it was a design for living that worked in tough going. And I discovered the same thing. I discovered true freedom. And there's only one kind of freedom, and that's freedom from the bondage of self. And I found intermittent freedom. And I would not have survived myself long enough to eventually work the steps if I hadn't have started doing 12-step work from day one. You know, I think sometimes in Alcoholics Anonymous we take in a lot of action and we don't know why, until the day comes and your very life is at stake. The day comes where if you haven't done everything that you've been doing, you know you'd be dead. And that day came in my 11th year. I talked earlier, we were doing the 4th step, and about the resentments I had when I discovered that, I got through them and got free of them. When I discovered that my wife had been sleeping with my sponsee and best friend the last year of my marriage, and that's why I ended up getting a divorce. I didn't know that. Well, the worst part about that was that when the divorce was final, I had the legal right to see my daughter. I just don't know if I have the emotional ability, because I got to go over to where they're living together to see her. And the idea of going over and knocking on the door where my ex-wife and ex-best friend are living together to see my daughter has just got my gut in a knot. But I miss my daughter. I love my daughter. I mean, I was the first human being to ever hold her. She cried her first tears in my arms. I was in the delivery room. I mean, she just took my heart. And I missed her. I had that heartache. I really missed her. So I missed her so much that I was willing to walk through this extreme anxiety to go over and pick her up for the day. And I made an appointment to come and get her. And I remember driving over to where they're all living together, and I pulled up in front. And I got out of the car and I walked up to got this knot in the pit of my stomach, walked up to the door and rang the doorbell, and the happy couple answers the door. It's like XX. It should have like poison, like a poison ball, XX, right? And I said, I'm here to get Kate. And they called Katie out, and Kate's the cutest little thing you ever seen. She's like 2 years old. And she comes out, she's just a sweetheart. She's just the cutest thing. I took her by the hand and we went off to spend the whole day together. And I wanted to have some fun stuff planned for her. And the first thing we did is we went to this pizza place that has horrible pizza. But she loved this place because you could play these games, and for about $90 you could win a 10-cent bracelet, She liked that stuff. And then I had it set up with some friends of mine that were involved in a ranch, a big ranch right at the edge of Vegas, and they had all kinds of animals there. My daughter loves animals to this day. She loves animals. And they had these little Shetland ponies, these little tiny ponies. And my daughter was pony crazy. She was Minnie Mouse and pony crazy. And when I told her she was going to get to ride a pony, she was very excited. And we played with a lot of the animals and feeding some of them. They brought a pony out. And she's just a little girl. And this pony is a little pony, but it's still pretty big to her. So we had to hold her and walk with her around the corral while she was on this pony. It was very exciting to her. She really liked it. Scared her a little bit, but it was cool. And we're done riding the pony around, and the guy came to take it back to the stables, and I'm sitting at this picnic bench with my daughter and this woman that's involved with the ranch. And my daughter's thirsty. And across the yard next to the stables on the wall is a soda pop machine with cans of soda in it. And so I said to the woman, I said, just hang out here for a little bit. I'm going to go get some cans of soda pop. And I went across the yard and I got 3 cans and I'm coming back across the yard. And as I get close to the picnic table, I hear the woman say to Katie, "Hey, Kate, here comes your dad with some soda." And Katie looks up and goes, "That's not my dad. Craig's my dad." And I'll tell you something. I felt like somebody stuck a knife under my rib cage, man. It was just brutal. I took my breath away. And I just pushed those feelings down. You know how we learn on those streets to act like nothing bothers us. Push those feelings down, put a smile on my face, and sat there for a while with my daughter, and then we went and did one more quick little thing, and then I had to take her home for dinner. And I'm driving up to where they're living together, and we pull up out front, and I get out, and I take her by the hand, and I walk her up to the front door, and I ring the doorbell, and the happy couple answers the door, and she jumps into his arms. And they say goodbye to me, and I turn around, and I walk back to my car, and I get in my car, and I drive about a block, and I have to pull over to the side of the road because I'm coming apart emotionally. And I'm sitting in my car, and I'm sobbing and talking to God at the same time. And I'm saying to God, I love my daughter, but I can't see her anymore. This hurts too much. I'm not big enough for this. And I made the decision to never see my daughter again. And it's killing me. But I can't imagine feeling that way on a regular. I couldn't imagine it. And I look at the clock on the dashboard, and I promised some stupid new guy I'd meet him down at one of the AA clubs and take him across town to a book study, a step study. I don't want to meet him. I need to go home and think. But I told him I'd meet him. You guys have brainwashed me into do what you say you're going to do. Show up where you say you're going to show. That's like AA 101. No matter what, you do what you say you're going to do. Oh, crap. So I'm racing. I'm afraid I'm going to be late. I'm racing across town. I get in front of the SOS club, and here's that guy standing out in the curb. I get in the car. We start shooting across town to this step study, and he's not in the car very long, and he starts to cry as he's telling me that he's been denied by the courts one more time to see his kids. And I'm looking at him, and I'm feeling his pain. And the thought goes through my mind, you know, Bob, there's only one person that can stop you from seeing your daughter, and it's you. And I thought, okay, I'll make an appointment and I'll pick her up again next weekend. And the weekend after that, and the weekend after that. And she's been in my life. I just helped her buy her first house. She just bought her second house. She's 30 years old now. She's the manager of a bank. She runs a big bank in Las Vegas. She's doing really well. She's the light of my life. Her and I we've scuba dived in the Caribbean and the Hawaiian Islands together. We've snow skied in the Rockies together. We've been all over Europe. She's been in England with me, in Scotland and Italy. We've traveled Australia. She bungee jumped from the top of a tower in New Zealand, which I thought, oh my God. Won't you, come on, Dad, join me. No. I don't pay money to have somebody scare me. I can just sit in a chair and do that for free. And that new guy, who he thinks I'm helping him, and God worked through him to save me from making the worst decision I could have ever made in my life. He saved the most important relationship is with my daughter. And he saved me from that. And the point being is that the helper here gets the help. If you're unwilling to do 12-step work, if you're unwilling to step up and ask people if they need a sponsor and be willing to sponsor them and make that a big piece of your program as Bill Wilson did, to proactively look for people to help. Don't wait for them to come to you. Get off your ass. Look for them. Find them. Seek them out. It's important to your recovery because God will work through those people and save you from it. The helper gets the help here. If you come to Alcoholics Anonymous and you remain a taker, I don't think there's anything you're going to get here other than alcoholism. I think that's all we got. But the givers get it all here. They get it all. And they get freedom. And maybe with the freedom comes the ability to laugh at ourselves. With the freedom is we're no longer serious. Life is no longer heavy. And there is one freedom, and I believe it contains all freedoms. And that is the freedom from the bondage of self. And step 12 and helping people and 12-step work and sponsoring people is all designed by God to help us to get free of ourselves. Many years ago, I had a sponsee who took a meeting once a month into a supermax penitentiary on the central coast of California. And this is not your typical prison. This is a prison where most of the population will never get out. There's a lot of people in there that have committed murders. There's a lot of big-time criminals that are doing multiple life sentences. And in this prison that has this huge population, there's also a fairly good-sized AA group, and they bring speakers in from the outside, and he got me to come up there to speak one time. And we go up to this prison, and it's quite an ordeal to go through all the security barriers. There's layers of security to get into the supermax penitentiary. We got through the security, and we're coming down this long hallway to this big dining room where the AA meeting is. And before you ever got to even around the corner to the entrance, you could hear and feel the buzz. And there's a buzz, there's an energy in a strong, recovery-oriented Alcoholics Anonymous group. You can feel it. I could hear it and feel it. It's like getting near a beehive. There's an energy there. And I turned the corner, and there's probably 15, 20 greeters in 2 rows to the entrance to the dining room. And they're all over us, just thanking us for coming and greeting us. Can we get you coffee? Can we anything? We get through the line of greeters, and I really was made to feel very welcome, and there was a sincerity in this. And we get inside, and the meeting's not going to start for a while. There's about 150 to 170 guys here. And there's an enthusiasm in the room. And I'm seeing on the back wall, I'm seeing guys in pairs with a big book. We were walking down near the river, and there was 2 guys sitting on a bench near the river. They were going through the big book together. Just the other day, right up here, right up near where our hotel is. It was really a nice thing to see. And they're sitting on the back wall, and my friend's telling me, oh, that's so-and-so. He's got 2 life sentences. He'll never get out of prison. And he's sitting there with a big book, and he's laughing and talking to this new guy. And I'm seeing another guy he's a lifer also. And I'm looking at these guys, and I'm thinking to myself, my God, these people who will never, ever, ever get out of prison are freer than people I go to meetings with in Las Vegas on a daily basis. Because there's only one freedom, and it contains all freedoms, and that's freedom from the bondage of self. Alcoholics Anonymous is designed to do slowly what alcohol did quickly, and that is to set me free and connect me once again to life. When Bill Wilson first found alcohol, he said, I was a part of life at last. When you find real freedom, you're a part of life at last. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love what it's done in my life. My daughter is never, she's 30 years old. She's never seen me drink. We have dinner together with her and I and my sister sometimes, and my sister just gets a sick enjoyment out of telling her things I used to do. Oh, and my daughter, who adores me, is looking at, oh, Dad, you didn't pee in the closet, did you, Dad? Yeah, Kate, I did, you know. But she's only ever seen what you've made of me. She never saw, she wouldn't like the guy I was before I got here. Thank you all for listening.